Hello, Reds from around the world, and welcome to All for United. I am your host, Joe O'Neill. Thank you so much for joining us here on this beautiful, cold, and miserable Monday evening. It is miserable for me. I hope it's not miserable for you because the weather outside is Baltic. So hopefully you are in somewhere nice like Sevilla or possibly Sweden. Because it is as cold in Sweden, but there's a lot better views there. I promise you on that. And we have someone who can have a perfectly good opinion on that very soon with the wonderful Phil O'Connor, who's joining us from Stockholm. And we have the amazing Graham Bailey, who's joining us from, I think, I'm going to say Middlesbrough. I didn't actually ask where he was, but I'm going to say Middlesbrough for the moment. And I'm going to take a wild guess and say the views aren't as nice as Stockholm up in Middlesbrough either. But wherever you are, thank you so much for joining us here. We are going to be discussing, as always, the weekend that has been with a major focus on Manchester United. And for once, I'm not going to be as depressed as usual with talking about Man United with the wonderful Carrick Ball, as we're going to call it, until maybe Thursday. So wherever you are in the world, sit back, relax, and we're going to take you away on a wonderful ride for the next 45 minutes talking all things football. See you in 20-something seconds.
Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from passionate Reds, only on All for United.
We are here and welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here on this wonderful Monday evening where we are all wearing black because we are still mourning the wonderful Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. That was off the top of my head, but as accurate as I could possibly make it. I am joined, as I said earlier on, by the wonderful Phil and the wonderful Graham, and we will be talking all things Premier League this weekend with a major focus on Carrick's Reds. So, Graham, I'm going to come to you first. Was this Carrick Ball we saw on the weekend, or was it the prefix to Ragnick Rock?
I think it was just, for me, I clearly wasn't as impressed as some of United fans are, but that's Ollie's big achievement from United. What I take from it, you know, his one achievement during his time at Old Trafford was to lower expectation levels, and the amount of United fans who are happy about going to Chelsea and playing such negative football and getting a draw, I find a bit depressing actually. But you're resolving that situation now. Ollie's gone, which is a step in the right direction as a club. You've gone for Ralph Rangnick, which I'm not entirely convinced by, to be honest. I'm not sure that system works, but you can look forward ahead to most likely Pochettino coming in. But no, I think this game will be forgotten very quickly in the near future. Well, I hope it is for United's sake, because if this is a blueprint, I don't envy you if this is the blueprint.
Oh, God, it's really horrible when you're not envied by a Middlesbrough fan. But guys, in the comments, I do agree with what Graham is saying. I think most of us are looking at it from like you said, Graham, the prospect of we've lost the Ollie era and looking towards a bit of sexy German football. So we're going to go to Phil on this. I'm going to come back to you on that eye roll, Graham. I don't think it was as subtle as you thought it was. But Phil, coming to you now, on your thoughts on the game of the weekend, did it show that better times are coming? Was this Carrick kind of setting himself up in the shop window as being a progressive manager, or was it just Ragnick in someone's ear?
I really don't think it matters, Joe. I think these games with any sort of caretaker manager or interim manager, you just got to get through them. Nobody remembers what happened when Ryan Giggs had temporary charge of the team in about 2014 or so, and he had this. Nobody remembers the performance. Nobody remembers if that heralded, you know, the dawning of a new era. And I really don't think it matters. I do think it's an interesting time for Manchester United, because I think that when Alex Ferguson stood down in 2013, wasn't it? I think they sort of pressed the pause button on the club then, and it's remained pressed ever since. And we've gone through a series of sort of false starts as they sort of attempt to get out of that and really start sort of the post-Ferguson era. But this now feels finally like the time where they're like, you know what, hang on, let's actually try something. Let's think about this. Let's not just make a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, he wins a few games, we give him a contract for several years. Or, oh, Louis van Gaal is free, let's get him. Or, oh, Mourinho, he's hanging around here, let's do that. So this feels like something that's very well thought out. But I don't think that the game yesterday tells us anything. It was kind of like, you know, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. As Graham was saying, it was quite negative football from Manchester United, but I don't think that's going to last very long. Ragnick's contract is signed now, so I think we'll start to see him having an effect on the side reasonably quickly after this.
Okay, there are two very measured arguments where telling Manchester United fans not to get excited. And this is what I felt was the perfect time for Stu to come in late. So we have a Manchester United fan who can get overly excited and lose himself in the whimsy of the magic that was Carrick Ball. So please, Stu, hold nothing back, let it go full Andy Tate, and say, let it go. Let me hear all the love you have for the absolutely perfect game that we were robbed out of 3 points of. I don't want that to be forgotten by a ridiculous referee decision. That I won't even go to the two lads because I know they agree with me. So Stu, I'll go to you, Stu. Where do you land on this? Was this, we won't say the dawning of a new era, but like maybe a light at the end of the tunnel, meaning that there is still hope for this team and this season?
Look, I didn't mind the performance. I thought it was okay. I was like most United fans actually at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of the day. Probably didn't expect too much out of it. But to be fair, I'm not quite sure what Carrick's been doing for the short time that he's been in charge, but he seems to have lit the blue touch paper on a lot of players. And so I agree with the lads. If I've heard right, that the game wasn't particularly pleasing on the eye, but football doesn't have to be pleasing on the eye. Sometimes you've got to just do what you can to stay in a game and survive. And I think we did that quite well. We got a lucky Jorginho mistake, but again, I thought Sancho put the goal away pretty well, really, because Mendy's been pretty good for Chelsea. In terms of where we go from here, in terms of whether Carrick will be there Thursday, in terms of what can be instilled between now and Thursday, I think it's going to be very, very little. I think it's going to be a tough job for Ranić to come and instill his possession and his pressing type game of football, because we're just not going to be fit enough to do that. And I'm not necessarily sure we've got the right amount of players to do that either. But look, I was happy with the draw. I'm one of those fans, you know me, Joe, as long as we show up and we turn up and the players turn up, I'm more than happy. So, yeah.
Yeah, same as me, Stu. I'm more than happy when my people show up on time as well.
Well,
we have the Axl Rose of the podcast here. Shows up when he feels it.
A, absolutely, and B, I've just finished playing footy, and I did score a bit of a worldie with the left peg. So
again, no video. If there's no video evidence, it didn't happen, and we were all wondering why you were sweating. So we now go to Graham on this kind of somewhat a hindsight of a question. I don't know where you land, Graham, on whether Ronaldo should be the starting striker in the current Manchester United setup, or should be, a relief player. But do you feel it was the right decision for Carrick to drop him and then bring him on when he did? When he actually, I don't think he intended to bring him on, but he had to because Sancho was injured. But do you feel it was the right decision in hindsight to drop him?
Not for me, no. I mean, if it wasn't for Ronaldo, you'd be rubbing shoulders with Eddie Howe's Newcastle at the moment, I think. And no, he's your best player for me. He's a striker. I think it was an easy get out of jail card, wasn't it? Let's drop Ronaldo and see how well we do. No, if going forward you don't think Ronaldo deserves to be in that team, well, time will tell. I still think he's good enough to be in that 1 to 11. Obviously, he has to earn it, but given some of the performances we've seen from the rest of the team, and let's see how it goes. We've seen Thomas Tuchel is a supposed disciple of Rangnick, as is Klopp, as is seemingly every single German coach in history is now a Rangnick disciple. A manager himself who's done very little in his career for me. So he might go over Tuchel route. He might play that target man. I love the football Thomas Tuchel plays. It's not old fashioned, but it's to the point. It's proactive. I love the way the fullbacks play. So I just think if Rangnick comes in, I think United fans should be aware. It may not all be Jurgen Klopp. It may be a bit of Thomas Tuchel. And if it is, fair enough. I hope he does identify that quickly. But I just don't. I think Ronaldo's been hung out to dry a little bit. And, some United fans care for what you wish for.
But before I move on to Phil, should we be excited by Rangnick?
If I was a United fan, I wouldn't be particularly. No, look at his CV. What's he done? What's he won? Nothing. If he was that good from Red Bull, why is he at Lokomotiv Moscow? He's not even the coach. Does absolutely nothing for me. It's the biggest club in the world. You should have just gone and got Pochettino. You'll probably be in charge of the summer anyway. You should have just stamped your authority on PSG. You are the biggest club in the world in my book, so go and get him. I don't agree with interim appointment. I think Rangnick's doing it to get a foothold in England. We'll probably see him become a sporting director at another club within 2 years. So if he helps out both parties, fair enough. But no, Rangnick does nothing for me.
Okay, very interesting take. And anyone who has thoughts agreeing with Graham or against Graham in the comments, please put them in there. But I'm going to come to you, Phil, on a similar question. First of all, do you think the draw against Chelsea flattered United, or do you think we because in fairness we did maybe have the best opportunities in the game, well, open goals, we'll say, clear nearly. So do you think that we could have got more of the game? Do you think a draw is fair? Do you think we should have lost that game? And also, what do you think the effect of Rangnick will have on this team?
Well, I think a draw is a very fair result. And I think the problem you have with Ronaldo is that if you decide to start Ronaldo in a game, you're already sort of showing your hand there, because there are certain things you can do and certain things that you can't do. And it doesn't matter who is going to be managing Manchester United, if it's only going to Solskjaer or whoever, Rangnick, it doesn't matter who it is, Carrick. If you do that, you're limited, you're constrained by that straight away. There's only a certain number of things that you can do with it, you know. I understand what Graham's saying there, that Rangnick's CV in the game seems to weigh an awful lot heavier than what's actually written on it. But I think it's this idea of him being a sort of a thought leader. There's a certain amount of coaches who've had a profound effect on the way the game is played, and they're not necessarily the most successful coaches who've had that. They've come in, I mean, Arrigo Sacchi at AC Milan was one of those coaches who came in, just turned everything on his head, and then we don't actually hear him mentioned as much anymore, you know, despite the fact that he was hugely influential in his time. Rinus Michels, the Dutch coach, was one of them. Johan Cruyff in his time. Guardiola is now mentioned among them. So I think what United are trying to do is they're trying to bring in Rangnick to give them a sort of a sense of DNA. And I'd actually kind of take issue a little bit with what Stu was saying earlier on there. You know, that it wasn't the most sort of sexy football in the world. It wasn't the most enticing football in the world, but you don't have to play that way. I disagree, Stu. I think when you are Manchester United, that you do have to play that way. You owe it to me as a neutral football fan to play that way, because I grew up watching this club and I've always wanted to see United at the very top of the Premier League playing that kind of football, because it makes the game more exciting for everybody, not just for Reds who support Manchester, but for Reds who support Liverpool and for Blues who support Everton. It's just, football is so much better when Manchester United play in the way that is in their DNA. And for that reason, this idea that Rangnick has of winning the ball back quickly and trying to shoot as quickly as possible after getting the ball back, that brings me back to, you know, I remember great performances that United had in the 90s against Norwich, where they just tore them apart, and where the game wasn't as tactical as it is now. It was a case of get your best players out there and say, look, you go out and you make the decisions. You have intelligent players out there who can see the game, who can read the game, led by the likes of Lee Sharp and Roy Keane and Eric Cantona, Steve Bruce, Gary Pallister, you Dennis Irwin in that team as well. You know, let good players play. But in order to do that, you need some sort of structure. You need some sort of DNA. I don't know if Paul Pogba is the kind of player that can play in that. I know Cristiano Ronaldo definitely is the kind of player that can play in that. But I do think that for United fans like yourselves as well, I think it's very, very important for the club to play the right way, as well as to win things, not just to win things.
Yeah, a great point. And I'm going to come to you. There is a question, a thought from the wonderful John Commode. I personally think that Rangnick getting a role on the board after the 6 months is the more significant than becoming manager. We need football people in the board. That's a question or a statement from John, but I'm going to place the question that I'm going to give to all of you. But I'm going to come to you first on that, Stu. We're going all the way around with it. Is his role as behind the scenes going to be more significant? I know it's very hard to predict. He could win the Champions League. We could finish 10th. It could be anything in between. We don't know how successful he will be as a coach, but it will kind of set the staple of what sort of behind the scenes he'll be, because that's the type of football he'll want and the type of manager he'll want to get into, implement it. But what are your thoughts? Which one do you think he'll be more significant in? And you're muted. Not.
There you go. Sorry, guys.
There we go.
Sporting director, football director of football, whatever you want to call him, I think is going to be a most pivotal role for him. I tend to agree with Graham with regards to his CV, etc. But I like what he stands for. I like his the way that he looks at the game, the way that he splits it into segments, the pitch, etc. I like that he plays, a possession-based game. I like that he plays a pressing game. But of course, we all know that a pressing game doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be running 100 miles an hour at your opponent. It's all about the positional play, which he does very, very well. But the real thing that he'll bring to the club is his ability to grow a football club, the way that Manchester United has been crying out for since Sir Alex left. You have to bear in mind, when Sir Alex was manager of the club, he did everything. There was him and David Gill. Nowadays, we're run by accountants and marketeers. Very, very good at what they do, exceptional at generating money, but have absolutely no clue whatsoever how to run the footballing side of the business. I think Rangnick will be vitally important to that side of it. He needs to surround himself, which I hope he will do, with the right people, because he's got to look at the club as a whole. He's got to look at our youth system. He's got to look at the women's team. He's got to look at our standards in our stadium. He's got to look at our standards at Carrington. I know they are doing that, and they've earmarked money for it. But actually, Phil, I do tend to agree with you. I guess my point was about Sunday, was we just needed to get over the line in terms of that particular match. I grew up in the 70s and watched some dire football under Sexton, and the early 80s with Atkinson. So I've seen the trajectory of where we've been and where we are. Fergie kind of spoiled the majority of fans today, and we do need to get that exciting style of play back. And I think Rangnick, he's got nothing to lose in 6 months, so I think he will instill that will and that want and that desire to win football matches, which we have been lacking in the past. So yes, I think he'll have a better or a more prominent effect as a sporting director.
And Graham, I'm going to come to you. Sorry, Noah's just in the comments. Noah, you all right, lads? Hope everyone is well. Noah, always great to hear from you. I haven't heard from you in a while. I hope life is fantastic. But Graham, coming to you on a point you made earlier, which is something that's been on my mind as well, but the fact that he went from German football kind of being like the leading light of that to Lokomotiv Moscow. And generally, like Ukrainian and Russian leagues are meant for Brazilians looking for passports and people who go in to get a paycheck, Samuel Eto'o and the like. So that, for me, is a bit of a red flag. Why is he at Lokomotiv Moscow and not at progressing another German club? But saying that, he did have fantastic success at Leipzig and at Salzburg. So behind the scenes, do you think that there is still a possibility that he will bring success, or is this just another Glazers thing for giving us false hope?
I think it more turns on John Murtough. Obviously, he's instigated this move, but I think United fans need to be careful. You're not appointing a Soriano Begaristan figure here. You're not appointing a figure in world football, and he's coming on an interim deal, and then it's a consultancy, which obviously he's happy with. And as I alluded to, I suspect he's getting his foot in the Premier League here, ready to take a sporting director job or a big job elsewhere. And fair enough if he helps United out, but I think this is more to do with John Murtough, and he's brought him in. He's showing he's got good contacts in the game by doing the deal quickly, whilst Ed Woodward, Matt Judge, etc. work on Pochettino behind the scenes. So I think John Murtough, it's fair play to him. He's told the Glazers he could get this guy. He's done it. So long term, I think it'll do John Murtough more good than it will Rangnick, because I really would. I'd press the big slightly for the United fans. You're not getting a world class operator in any sense of what you say that he's done a great job at Leipzig. Has he? With all the money they've spent, they should be challenging the top two. What are Leipzig doing at the moment? They're not. They're making okay efforts. Are Leipzig doing any more than what Wolves are doing in the Premier League? They should be doing. They should be doing what a Man City did, coming at them all guns blazing, going for the titles. Leipzig aren't challenging for the Bundesliga title. Yeah, he's got them up, but he's used the Red Bull money to do that. In fact, yeah, it shows he's good at spending money. But let's not. I think it's a little bit over the top about Rangnick. I really do. I think he's a safe pair of hands. He's a good pair of hands, but in 12 months' time, if they get the man they want, Pochettino, I think Ralph could be. You could be seeing him in a distant dream in your in the back mirror.
I will say on to defend Leipzig, and I don't particularly like speaking about Leipzig. I stand with the majority, with 50+1 with the Bundesliga fans, and saying Leipzig should not be aren't mentioned by Bild and should not be mentioned by anyone. But they did get from nowhere with that money they were Champions League semi-finalists. They have gotten to top two, and we know how difficult it is. Like Bayern Munich have such a stranglehold on the Bundesliga that it's such an impossibility to do it. Like Dortmund have brought through some of the best players seen in football, and they can't get past that because their players have like 2 or 3 lifespan there, and then they're sold on, generally to Bayern Munich or someone, and that's sort of their model. And unfortunately, I will say fortunately, Leipzig model, it means that they'll probably be just a Dortmund 2.0. But and I hope it stays like that, because I really, really don't like them, or PSG, or Man City, or Liverpool, even though different reasons I don't like Liverpool.
Well, why don't you like Leipzig? Because the views used ownership to buy where they are.
Yeah, I kind of stand by the German fans, and I wish that all football was like that, where I know they have their own particular style of safe owners, whatever, the thing that came in after.
Yeah,
the
but
Glazers bought
on that premise, then, so on that premise, by not having this projection of ownership and money coming in from elsewhere, that just means like United or Liverpool will always forever stay on top, because it's those who are getting the big attendances. So unless you're getting a big attendance, you're not allowed to spend on football.
No, but I would say I don't particularly have an issue with a club being bought, but it all depends on who the owners are for me. I think, like, for me, Jack Walker, it was Blackburn, they beat us to the title, but that for me is like a fan buying a club and bringing them to the pinnacle. That for me that's perfect. And even if you look at, I'm sorry I can't pronounce his name, the former Leicester City owner passed away.
Yeah.
That's a similar thing where he came in with a love for the city, a love for the club.
How's that a similar thing? He runs duty around the world. He had no link to Leicester before buying them.
But he went in that. But he went in with the intention of bringing that club to where they were it's not like they went in and bought all the best players from around the world. They went in and spent wisely.
That's exactly what they did. With Jamie Vardy, they spent £1 million on a player from League Two, which was unheard of at the time.
Yeah, but again, it was from League Two. It's not going out and buying Robinho.
No, but Leicester were look where Leicester were at the time. It's exactly that same premise. They bought Mara. They spent hordes of money when they were in the Championship.
They didn't spend lots of money on Mahrez. I don't know. I think in fairness,
look where they were though. They're in the Championship. So when they did buy him, in terms of where they were, they did spend an awful lot of money.
I would say I would disagree with you on that. I don't think they spent a lot of money compared to the money that was brought in, and compared to clubs that have been bought in similar situations from outside. Would say from outside the country.
I just like this thing, Joe. I like to have this. Obviously, my own Middlesbrough went up through the local businessman, but I like these clubs who are in League One now. If a Russian billionaire was to buy Morecambe, let them go for it. And obviously, if Gary Neville gets his way, that'll never ever happen. But hopefully, we can still have that. I love the romance. I'm an old romantic at heart, I guess.
No, great, and I do agree with you. And I don't have an issue, like I said, with the club being bought. I just have a problem with some of the owners who are buying them. And for me, Leicester is like a dream. Blackburn is a dream, and I wish we had a United. But we will come back to this, Graham, in a future debate, because we're here to talk about Premier League football.
Since Ollie took over, no one in the Premier League spent more money than Man United. What more do you want? 400 million?
I want someone who comes in and spends the money well. As you said, Graham, that person's Ragnick. Phil, my man, we are coming to you now. You're waiting super patiently and super wonderfully with a great beard. One day I hope to have it.
No, I think you just made a very interesting point there about spending the money wisely. And it was like the cautionary tale really for Manchester United over the last few years has really been Liverpool Football Club, because since they won the last time they won the old First Division, as it was, and whenever, way back 1989, 90, that they really went off the rails. And I remember talking to many people who've worked for Liverpool over the years, and they were saying that Liverpool's thing was that they were buying players who weren't Liverpool players. Now, it's not that they weren't good footballers, but they weren't the kind of players that you need to play for Liverpool. And we've kind of seen that as well since Ferguson has stood down, because Ferguson, as you mentioned earlier on, Joe, he was so involved in the day-to-day running of the club. He knew absolutely everything about everybody, So to the extent that so you used to live in Sweden, Joe, as a friend of mine, Bojan Djordjic, who was born in Serbia but raised over here, he moved over in 1999. The year I moved to Sweden, he moved over to Manchester United. And Alex Ferguson still texts his dad. That's how involved he was. But he made sure that he was picking the right characters. And I think Bojan may have only ever played one Premier League game, but he was involved in all these guys. But since then, we've kind of seen him, he let some players go. But when you have Pogba coming back in, even Jadon Sancho, I spent a lot of time with a lot of German football people during the Euros, and they were utterly convinced that Gareth Southgate didn't know who Jadon Sancho was. And the Manchester United scouts knew very well who Jadon Sancho was and exactly how to get the best out of him. But the Ole and the coaching staff, as they seem from the scouting staff, didn't. And if you look at how that kid has started at Manchester United, that's borne out in what we've seen, because okay, what do we do with this guy? Do we put him in there as a is he a playmaker? Is he a winger? What's he going to do? And it's taken a long time for him to get settled in there. So that is the thing for Manchester United, as Graham was mentioning. Like, nobody spent more money than Manchester United, but they've bought so many square pegs for so many round holes. And the big challenge really that Rangnick faces now is that, if he's going to do this thing, let's say that he does the 6 months plus the 2 years of consultancy, he has to fix a structure that everybody's going to be able to play within. He has to get rid of all the players that don't suit that structure. I would say Paul Pogba is one of the first of them. Harry Maguire is probably another one. probably going to need a new goalkeeper, might need a couple of fullbacks, you know, so they're going to have to change all those things. Then he's going to have to hand it over whilst they bring in new players and try to make United a competitive team again. And that's no mean feat. And Liverpool were, you know, the guts of 3 decades in the wilderness. And for me, as a, you know, going back to the point I made earlier, I don't think Manchester United can afford that. Obviously, they're a huge brand. They're one of the most popular football clubs, if not the most popular football club in the world. But you still have to win games, and you still have to be there at the latter stages of the Champions League. You have to be there in the last weekend of the Premier League. So this is a really sort of key time now. I think that Rangnick, you know, he could probably do it as well as anybody, but I'd certainly, you know, better than those people who've tried before him, such as David Moyes and Van Gaal and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
That was a very Swedish way to say Solskjaer, by the way, Phil, to end it. That was so pretentious. I was like, Phil, Jesus Christ.
What am I going to do? I can't come on here and pronounce the man's name wrong just because you do it, Joe.
Just because we like to, okay? We're good Irish and English stock. We don't like to be taught anything new.
Do you know what? Like, I actually feel really sorry for the last word on him. I feel really sorry for him. I've got a few years ago when he was still managing Molde. He'd been to Cardiff City, and you know it hadn't really worked out for him. And it was around the time of Euro 2016, so just in the spring before that, because Eidur Gudjonsson, who used to play for Chelsea and Barcelona, he had gone up to Molde.
Gudjonsson, for anyone,
for anybody
out there,
anybody who doesn't speak Icelandic. So I went up there to interview the two of them, you know. And Solskjaer was doing his thing there because, again, it was like being Manchester United. It was like, okay, I just get the 11 best players and I send them out there, and it doesn't matter because they're just that good. They're going to win all the games anyway. And people said to me at the time, not either, but people said to me at the time, like, that's going to be Ole's big problem going forward, is that he doesn't need to be as tactically sharp. His game management doesn't have to be that good because eventually he just has too many good players. I just keep bringing them off the bench until they win the game. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of what happened. That was kind of how he got found out in the Premier League.
Yeah. Poor Ollie. Still love the man. Never
lad.
not. Did he ever score against Middlesbrough, Graham? I'll say what the answer is. The answer is yes.
I think he might have scored later on. He never completely ran a game against us. He wasn't. I
don't think he ever did that against anybody.
I would also say
I don't remember Ollie too much, to be honest. Marginino and Boxic when we played against you, really. It was Mario.
Oh, there it is. There's the attack. We were waiting for that. Yeah. Stu, I'm going to come to you. Closing thoughts on I'll round the table again, but closing thoughts on Man United's 1-1 draw with Chelsea.
Yeah, it's like I said at the beginning, really. I kind of knew what to expect. I figured we'd have our backs against the wall. Take the lads' points that Manchester United shouldn't be playing that way. But you just have to take it as where we are currently, the way that the players are performing, the way the club is as a whole at the moment. We've kind of lost our way for the last few years under Van Gaal, under Mourinho, and under Ollie. I was desperately upset when Ollie was removed. I wanted him to succeed. I felt that he had the best interests as the club, but there's a lot of people in the fan base who never rated him and wanted this so-called world-class manager, whoever there is out there. I'm not so sure about Pochettino myself. I think I'd much prefer Ten Hag. I think he plays a more methodical, better balanced game that would suit us better than Pochettino. But the fan base is split on that as well. People just rate Pochettino. He just doesn't do it for me. But look, we came away with a draw. We're 5 points off fourth. If we have a good run, if we can beat Arsenal Thursday, and then I think there's a favourable run of games for us. If we can, progress in the cup competitions, I think we could have a solid season towards the end.
And we have a cup specialist with Ronaldo, as the wonderful Roy Keane said. Moving on, we have done. I
thought he made a good point. I thought Keane made a good point. I appreciated what Carragher was saying, but I think Keane's got a good handle on it. I think we are 2 or 3 years away from challenging properly for the Premier League, and I think currently our best option to silverware is the cups.
My problem is with, I think both Keane and Carragher make great points, and you can see exactly where they're coming from on both sides. My problem is with Twitter and stuff like that. They don't listen to the full argument the person's making. They take two sentences and then say, he's an idiot, he said this. Because I had to defend Roy Keane, and I will gladly defend Roy Keane because I feel like he's taken as being this bully and just there's someone who doesn't know about football and just like a showman, when I'm like, he's a lot more going on there than you believe, and people just want to show him up because they disagree with him, and it does my head in. But we have to move on because So we have a lot more game to do, and we've reminisced wonderfully about Man United. And speaking of reminiscing, Solskjaer scored against Middlesbrough in a 3-3 draw in 1996. There we go. Probably with Janino and Ravanelli as well. But we are going to touch on a quick boo before we get to talk about this next team. A quick boo for them. We are talking about Liverpool and their 4-0 win over Southampton. I know, Graham, you were at that game, and from that, I would say going into the season, the first while, I didn't really see Liverpool as contenders. I just thought defensively they weren't going to be up to where they were a couple of seasons ago. But things seem to be changing. Can we get anything from this game that makes you believe that they could be number one at the end of the season, or do you think they might be just below a possible Chelsea or Man City?
No, I think it's impossible to tell at the moment. I think it's turned out to be an epic Premier League season. I don't think any of us really would confidently be able to predict who the winner would be out of Liverpool, City and Chelsea at this moment in time. And I think it's a hallmark. It's just showing up the Premier League in all its glory. Liverpool didn't get out of first gear on Saturday. Southampton were absolutely woeful. They went for a back three and it's not hindsight. We were all sat in the press box going, what is he playing here? And he went for a back three with Lianco, who one of the worst Premier League debuts I've ever seen. And they went man for man with Mane, Jota, and Salah. And them three will never have an easy game. So you can't take much from this game. The full backs is something you'll take away when, I have this thing with Ben on the show regularly where he claims Aaron Wan-Bissaka is a right back. I've yet to see it in a United shirt. And when you see Trent Alexander-Arnold, wow. That's what you call a right back. Aaron Wan-Bissaka. In fact, Ragnick's first duty should be to make him sit down and watch every game that Alexander-Arnold has played and say, you have to get near that. But I think the full-backs is a big thing. I think in January you might look at that. I think it's a real worry. They'll lack a threat from that position, and that's what you can take from this Liverpool team. Robertson and Alexander-Arnold, if you're watching this game, that's the one thing you take from this game. They were on the toes all the time, tracking back up and down. Nobody works harder. And I just don't think we see that with United. So if there's one thing from a United point of view, we might see that in terms of the way Klopp plays. But no, other than it was an impressive result, there wasn't much we could take out of that game other than I think Southampton are probably worse than we thought and could be in relegation trouble. But yeah, Liverpool up there and impossible to tell. But yeah, I think they're very much on par with City and Chelsea at the moment.
Yeah. Phil, for you, I kind of agree. I completely agree with what Graham's saying. And Trent Alexander-Arnold had a pretty woeful season last season, but he has shown his class with the ability he's come back, not just for but for England as well. But for you, Phil, not just looking at this game, because I completely agree with Graham. Like, this was a win before they even stepped out of the park. It was just a matter of getting the first one in, then how many can go in afterwards. So it's a standard home victory that Manchester United fans dream of.
It was like Joe. It was like watching Liverpool United all over again.
Why would you do that to us? Why, Graham?
That's harsh.
We have been so polite to you. I've only barely ripped apart Middlesbrough, and you went straight for it.
2-4. Stood up.
Yeah, wow. We haven't mentioned the two FA Cup finals she lost in the late 90s.
Oh, we're going there now as well.
Yeah. Sorry,
that wasn't against United. That wasn't against United.
Yeah, we don't have
3 wins we had.
We probably could get Roberto Di Matteo on the show. He'd gladly speak about it.
I think we'll have to bring Brian Robson back now to sort of to settle the peace here.
We've got him.
But
we're still thankful for you for giving us Steve McLaren, our greatest ever manager. We're still thankful to you.
Oh yeah, and that UEFA Cup final was pretty great. Sorry. This isn't supposed to be throwing shade at anyone. This is supposed to be we're all friends. But Phil, going to you, like we said, this is a foregone conclusion, the Southampton game. But for you, Liverpool as a whole, how impressed have you been by them this season? Is this a team on par to what they were when they won the league in the season before?
Yeah, I think so, Joe, but I think they have the same weaknesses because, if you were depending on Virgil van Dijk, he's just like, we saw the difference, when they tried to play without him after he suffered that knee injury and they just weren't the same team and their defense was a complete and utter mess, so there's that's one major weakness. If anything was to happen to him again, I think he could probably kiss, the winning the Premier League goodbye. But the other thing again is we're back to the African Nations Cup and the fact that Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah are going to be leaving the team now for a few weeks, and obviously they'll be hoping that, both of them get knocked out after the group stage, but there's not really a whole lot. Diogo Jota is a fantastic player, and even before he came to the club, I was going, okay, this guy would fit right in here, and he's just getting better and better and better for every week. But they really don't have a whole lot now. what's his name? The Swiss lad is gone. The fellow with the biggest calf muscles in the world.
Shaqiri.
Shaqiri, yeah, so he's gone. So they just don't seem to have that kind of depth in the attack anymore. And I'm sure that's something that, it wouldn't surprise me for them to bring a big name in. Firmino doesn't look like he's any confidence whatsoever. So I really think that that's going to be a very testing time for them in January, early February, But I do think that the biggest problem that they have is Virgil van Dijk. If you go back through, the great teams throughout history, if you go back through the great Premier League teams and all the history of the Premier League, we mentioned Pallister and Bruce earlier on, there's not just one centre back, there's two great centre backs in each of those teams, and they were the rocks on which the whole thing were built. Liverpool are getting away with one. That's just how good Van Dijk is. And you can put me in there beside him. We still probably wouldn't concede a goal. He's that good. But if he gets injured, or if he gets tired, or if he has an off day, and God knows he has very few off days, they don't have the depth that a Chelsea have at the moment, and they certainly don't have the depth that a Manchester City have at the moment. So that would give the Reds of Manchester some hope. I would hope coming into the winter season.
Yeah. If we
did you notice, guys? Did you notice one thing? That Klopp, who thinks that Joe Gomez is England's best centre half, he didn't even make the bench on Saturday, Joe Gomez, and he wasn't injured.
That's
but
very interesting.
I must say, I saw Konate play. I wasn't very impressed by Big Konate. I'll give him he had a bit of a tough game against Borough at times, but yeah, Gomez didn't even make the bench. But I totally agree with Phil. Van Dijk was so good Saturday, but he didn't have to go. He didn't have to go.
No, exactly.
Before I go to you, Stu, I want to actually go back to Brian, because I know you did an article about the African Cup of Nations and Liverpool players. So I'm just interested to get your thoughts on what Phil was saying on that in particular. Like, how effective, how can that dismantle their season? Now, the wonderful Owen O'Connor, who was supposed to be waxing lyrical about Liverpool right now, but couldn't make the show, he'll be on next week, has commented saying they'll only miss 2 games properly due to the AFCON, though, Palace and Brentford, I think. That's a shaked head by Graham. He's been showing this at United all day. Can he show some this at Liverpool too?
Here we go.
No, well, I actually spoke to Jurgen Klopp in the press conference. I asked him the question because at the moment, Liverpool do not know when these 2 guys are going. As it stands, they are due to leave on Boxing Day, which would mean they miss the Leeds, Leicester and Chelsea games, which are in between that date and January 2nd. Liverpool are trying to get them delayed until about January 3rd and 4th. And if they do delay them, they'll be able to play against Leeds, Leicester and Chelsea. And after that, there's a couple of cup ties. There isn't anything of substance, although they may get delayed as well. It's that Chelsea game on January 2nd that Jurgen Klopp is desperate to have them available for. So they don't know as of yet, and he confirmed that. They are hopeful, he said, when I asked him the question. So I wouldn't rule out them being delayed. I think Liverpool are going to do everything they can to keep these 2 guys till January the 3rd. And if they do, that could have a huge consequence in the title race.
Oh, that's getting exciting. As long as the consequences are Liverpool not winning the title, then we can't win it, but neither can they. So
I'll just close up on that, because the lads have covered it really, to be fair. And all I was going to say is the head-to-heads will be the real killer. Whoever comes out on top on the heads-to-heads, I think will win the title. But I think Graham's right. If you were to ask anybody now, nobody else to pick a winner. Absolutely no chance. And Chelsea, if I'm not mistaken, haven't they got the World Club Cup coming up in the next couple of weeks? Are they away for a week, 2 weeks?
But I think their games get postponed, and so it doesn't really affect, I don't think.
No, but my point being, there's injury potential, isn't there? I don't know who they've got. I know the draw was made today, wasn't it? I don't know who they've got, but there's injury potential. I think the only team that's probably sitting pretty out of the 3 at the minute would be City.
And speaking of City, we're going to touch on them now. We're going to go to Phil O'Connor on that. Phil, to begin with, now we'll say they obviously outside, we'd like to think Man United are bigger danger to Chelsea title than West Ham, but not going by the league table. But definitely West Ham could have been a slippery slope for Man City to get over. Now they did. What do you think that result tells us about this City team? Because they are known to go on runs and they are known not to lose. Do you think that is a big win for them this season, or just a standard win?
I think it's bigger than what we might think, because West Ham are actually playing so far above what you might expect that, West Ham are one of the better teams in the league. And much of all, it pains me, it feels really weird to say that. They're actually a really, really good, really well organised team with some really good individual players, And it was interesting because I actually saw that whole game yesterday, and the start of it was amazing because like West Ham put it up to them, so really the first sort of 15, 16, 17 minutes, West Ham were playing really, really well. Then Mahrez had a goal ruled out for offside. And after that, City started to come into it a little bit more. And now I only saw the game once, so I didn't have a chance to sort of sit down and go, okay, why did things turn in Man City's favour? I honestly think that the half an hour up to half time was a bit chaotic because there was an awful lot of snow falling. The ball was getting stuck in the pitch. It was very difficult to play a passing game. The ball was actually leaving sort of stripes along the pitch when they passed it through the snow, And eventually City did get a goal before half time, and eventually they got a goal in the second half as well. Then West Ham got an absolutely brilliant goal with the last kick of the game as well. But it was remarkable to see City go out there and to really sort of control the game and dominate the game in the second half, because West Ham had very, very little in the second half. So once City worked out how to get on top, they managed to stay there. And I think that that's a warning sign to the rest of the teams, because as we were saying, it's very hard to pick anybody from Liverpool or Chelsea, but it's that consistency that City can bring to the table. And this goes back to where we started this whole discussion about Rangnick and having a sense of DNA, knowing exactly what it is that you want to do in any given situation, what you really want out there. And I remember reading 20, 30 years ago about Terry Venables, about how he used to select players and how you're looking for an intelligence. You're looking for a player who you can teach to play the game, and they'll always play the game the right way. We saw an awful lot of that under Pep's Barcelona teams, and we're seeing the same thing now, that you can almost see the decisions they're going to make, the runs they're going to make before they get the ball at all. They're reacting instantaneously to what's happening around them, whereas a slightly lesser team or a slightly lesser player doesn't do that. And that might have been what happened with West Ham yesterday. They just weren't as automatic as what Manchester City were.
Yeah. Stu, coming to you on a similar question, where are City right now? Is this the same City that we saw last season almost conquer everywhere? I'm going to remind everyone they didn't. So where are this City team now, even compared to what they were 6 months ago?
Well, I want to touch on something Phil said. He talked about player intelligence. I talk about that a lot, Phil, about player intelligence. And I talk about a lack of intelligence that Manchester United players are demonstrating at the minute. And I'm hoping that Rangnick, if he's got this ability to instill that within them, that's one of his first tasks. With regards to City, I saw the game yesterday. I thought it was quite interesting, the time of the snowfall and the way that City were playing. It pains me to say it. It really does pain me to say it. I don't think you can compare City from this season to where they were last season or 2 seasons ago, because Guardiola and the City players have got this ability, as Phil mentioned, just to go on a run. They've got this ability to turn a game on its head when it looks like it could slip away from them. And West Ham are a difficult customer for anybody to play at the minute. And I've always said, Joe, and you've heard me mention this a couple of times, you can have a good group of 11 footballers that aren't what you would call standout players, but if they're well drilled, they've got that collective will to win, they can be very, very difficult to break down. And I think West Ham, they've got some wonderful players, don't get me wrong, but they're very, very well drilled at the moment, and they've got this collective spirit that makes them difficult to beat. So I think City will just chalk it off as another win. But I wouldn't necessarily compare them to last season or the season before. City have this ability to be different every season, but still with the same outcome.
Graham, I'm going to come to you on not so much this game, but you can, of course, reference this game if you want to. But it is mentioned a lot, like they do go on insane winning streaks. The most notable one being the final, whatever it was, 17 games of the season when Liverpool and them went toe-to-toe, and they just won every single game, including barely beating Burnley 1-0, but they still beat them. But they do sometimes just throw away stupid results. Like I think in that season they lost to Newcastle away. They keep losing to Palace. Like they do. There is banana skins there, and they lose to us a few times too. Where do you stand on City this season compared to other ones? Are they as well-oiled machine, or is there always a banana skin waiting for them?
I think they are. What I love about Pep at the minute is he's challenging his players. He's got this squad now where, in the summer we heard Bernardo Silva wanted to leave, which he did. He challenged him to get back in the team and make it count. He's done the same with Raheem Sterling. Now he's got Ferran Torres, who was agitating for a move because he's not happy. He keeps challenging these guys, and he's got Jack Grealish as well. So I love it from that point of view. I think it's a little bit unfair because, they've got for me, the two best midfielders in the world in Kevin De Bruyne and Phil Foden, who just a genius, and he'll dominate the Premier League for the next 10 years. So it's a slightly unfair where they're coming from. But I think, I think Chelsea, I love the fact they're all coming out from a different place. We got Liverpool and City, and I love the way Tuchel's got his Chelsea team going. But City, I see the comments. I do think they are. I think they would be my slight favourites, just because of the consistency they've got. I think Ruben Diaz for them has been, over the last 12 months, what an important signing he has been. He has been fantastic. I don't think Gundogan gets enough praise either, but I think Ruben Diaz having that stake, that real centrepiece, as Phil was talking about Van Dijk, how important he is at the heart of Liverpool defence. And I know we talked about Chelsea, but it's Rudiger who's the world-class performer back there. And I think Diaz makes such a huge difference there, where you can put Stones in, you can put whoever in next to Diaz. He has been a sensational signing, and to be fair, a lot of clubs looked at him and didn't take the plunge when he was at Benfica. They didn't think he was right, but wow, what a signing he's been. I think he's crucial, every bit as crucial as De Bruyne and Foden as well.
I have to agree with you on that, and I also agree with you in Phil Foden. I think he did not shine. He did not show his inner Gaza at recent Euro 2020s and Euro 2021.
Well, it's that again, that's down to the managers, as we said. That was the problem with Ollie in this United team. The one thing that was lacking was a good manager. Look at that game behind me, England-Italy. England didn't win that because Italy's manager was better than ours.
I genuinely just wanted to take a shot for Phil Foden for dyeing his hair. That was it.
Well, I thought he was a tit for dyeing his hair, to be honest. You can't dye your hair.
You're in good company for that. Yeah. And also, thanks, Greg, for bringing up the fact that you lost to Italy. I did not take great joy in that, watching in my Stockholm apartment with all Irish people losing our minds. I swear to God that didn't happen. Guys, I'm going to mention the results that happened today. I won't touch on them because there has been somewhat breaking news, but I'll just say the results. Arsenal, who are they? Beat Newcastle 2-0. Norwich and Wolves, banger of a 0-0 draw. Villas, unfortunately, beat Palace. I say that because Steven Gerrard's the manager. Brighton Leeds, 0-0 again. Brentford beat Everton. That's pretty nice. City, West Ham has recovered. Leicester 4-2 over Watford. And, of course, United and Chelsea. But the somewhat breaking news, it got released about 45 minutes ago to an hour, that the Ballon d'Or winner of 2021 is Lionel Messi. I don't know where we all stand on the Ballon d'Or. I personally don't agree with anyone. I don't know. I don't understand how someone can be a best player in a league when it's a team sport. I don't really see that. I think like a team of the year makes more sense than a player, but that's a personal choice. I can have an argument about that, but I don't think it's personal choice to say how did Messi win this. That's my opinion. Graham, I'm going to come to you first. We'll go Phil, then Stu. But is this the right decision?
I think, he wouldn't, if I was handing it out, he wouldn't have got it. But I did see some tweets and some explanations where he was 28 in 28 for Barcelona. He helped Argentina to Copa America, which wasn't a legitimate Copa America. It shouldn't have been played, but hey, they did win it. But no, it was a strange one. I think Lewandowski, he was sat there looking very unfortunate. He already knew the result, didn't they? We all did when looking at the odds. We all knew the result. So I think he was hugely unfortunate. And if it's gone in the last 12 months, it should be Jorginho, what he did at Chelsea, winning that Europa final. I've watched him closely this season. I watched him at Newcastle recently, and wow, when you just concentrate on a player and see how good someone is, I probably didn't appreciate how good he is. But he was never going to win. But for me, Jorginho would have been my particular vote on this one.
And you know why? Because he actually had a good season. Because the thing is, and Lewandowski had a wonderful season. And the thing is, I know, Graham, you're only saying that you saw the facts that people put out that saying he had 28 and 28 for Barcelona. Absolutely. Lewandowski had a far better season, and the club had a better season, and there were more important games that he scored in, and he scored more goals. So, straight away, therefore, that just reneges that argument that whoever put forward.
Didn't he win something like 6 trophies as well in the calendar year?
Yeah.
Something like that? 6 trophies, 5
includes the champion. That was this year he won the Champions League, 2021, yeah? And that was Chelsea. That was the last season, but still they're both behind closed doors. But still, Jorginho makes the argument there, and he won the European Championship. Phil, going to you now. It should have been Zlatan, shouldn't have?
It's every year. I mean, basically, they have the golden balls, what they call here in Sweden, and I think he won it 10 times in a row. He's won it 11 times. He just won one there again a few weeks ago. It's like, okay, they just changed its name to the Zlatan ball and just give it to him. But I mean, I think Lewandowski, I just feel so sorry for the guy, and I'm always the problem with the Ballon d'Or when you have like a magazine like France Foot who's making this award. It's like, okay, who if you're going to piss off Nike or whoever it is, Messi sponsored by that, is that why you're doing it? Because I think you could argue that Lionel Messi is probably the greatest player I've ever seen, right? And, I'll argue that all night with anybody. Was he that last year? No. Lewandowski was he just delivered so much more. And there's always this thing as well of, okay, who are you doing it for and where? Because I'm sure you could probably pick somebody out of the championship who had an absolutely brilliant season, who's playing with a crappy team. Wesley Hoolahan, what a wonderful footballer he is. I think he's playing for Cambridge. He could probably get it every year as well. So it all depends. And it's so diffuse. It's so hard to put that together. So, okay, is it the number of goals, the number of assists? You'll never see a centre-back with it. You'll never see a Trent Alexander-Arnold with it. We'll go back to Philippe Lahm, who used to play for Bayern Munich, who's a tremendous defender and could play in the midfield and that kind of thing. A player like him would have been more than deserving of it, but he's just not going to win it because he doesn't play up front in the sexy positions, So that's the really difficult part of it. But I do think that, if anybody ever deserved one, it was Lewandowski, and it's probably his last chance, So it's a shame to see it. And, I try not to get excited about it. I try not to get upset about individual awards in a team sport. It really should come down to leagues and Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues and European Championships. But every time, it still fucking annoys me.
But you just like to see a player who has earned it get it. Do you know what I mean? And Messi just did, and it kind of, for me, it tarnishes his career a little bit.
Yeah, well, especially when you think about how things finished up at Barcelona and all the messing around with tax and all the, will he stay, won't he stay, can he stay, take a pay cut, all this kind of thing, And eventually the soap opera gets to me and you want to go, okay, what did he do on the football pitch? And in that case, I don't think there's any argument. Every time you looked at Sky Sports News the last year, like Lewandowski was after scoring some goal or winning some trophy with Bayern Munich. When you looked at him in the national team, a tremendous player, carrying a third-rate national team and really having them performing above their level, And I do think at some point you have to recognize that, because it's one thing if you're Ronaldo and you're playing with Portugal, or if you're playing, Messi and you're playing with Argentina. We can argue until the sun comes up about Argentina and how good they are as a national team, but they're still one of the best national teams in the world. He's playing for Poland. Poland haven't been good since, Brian Clough was calling their goalkeeper a clown in the 70s, or maybe in the 80s, he had a couple of decent World Cup teams. But that's, he really is the only standout player in that team, and he's done really, really well for him. So it's a shame, but, I think, as Lewandowski himself said, well, if it was anything other than politics, he would have won it. And I think, that would have to be leaving the last word of that, if nothing else.
Oh, completely. And Owen, the wonderful Owen, I'm sorry, but that is laughable that Jorginho is the best player in the world. Well, at least you're sorry, Owen. Stu, for your closing point, why you don't think it's Messi? Who should have been and why not Messi?
Well, I would have gone for Lewandowski anyway because of the season that he's had, and Phil makes a great point about dragging a second-rate nation in Poland. But the problem that you've got with the Ballon d'Or is politics. It's plain and simple as that. I mean, I can't remember who are. I think it's one journalist vote, isn't it, per country? And I think it's Henry Winter.
Jesus!
I'm sure it's Henry Winter. I could be wrong, but I think it is. And then it just winds me up that now PSG have got the Ballon d'Or winner and they don't deserve it. And I it's all politics for me. I don't agree with it. I never have. I think Ronaldo came sixth, didn't he? Sixth or seventh in the standings. Salah came a bit later after that. I think I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen them all yet. So I just don't agree with it. And I'm reading Messi's comments now about Lewandowski, saying he's a great striker, an amazing goal scorer. Maybe he'll win a trophy next year, especially being such a big guy. I can't abide bollocks like that. So I've got nothing more to say. I just can't be doing with it.
Let's be honest.
I agree him actually. I was.
I love the way Stu. By the way, I love the way Stu said I've nothing more to say. But I agree with Graham. And
no, I just wanted to talk about Jorginho, and I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the simplicity of how to play football as a centre midfielder, and it gets completely bypassed by the eye test. People talk about the eye test all the time. And I used to play in my youth centre mid before I went down back to centre half. And I just used to play it very, very simple all the time. But you can be so effective by the way you position yourself, by the way you get the ball and drop it 2 or 3 yards, step 2 or 3 yards to the right, receive it again, and then drive with it, which is exactly what Jorginho does. But the eye test, Graham, it's the eye test.
Speaking of the eye test, it's now time for the bye test. That's me trying to figure out how to say bye.
Well done. I like
thank
that.
you. That was pretty good.
That was embarrassing.
That was a bit of a Fred McTominay turn there, wasn't it? Like you, but
what fucking hell? Is that the oil tanker?
that wasn't a Jorginho turn there, was it?
It kind of went off his shin and out for a throw in, but
that was a McFred turn there. McFred in full glory.
Yeah, but we'll retain possession. Okay, we still kept all the ball. It just didn't look as nice as it should have. But yeah, guys, that has been a show for tonight. Thank you so much to Stu, Graham, and Phil for joining us.
Sorry, I'm late.
Sorry. Monday evening. Don't lie, Stu. You're fucking the Axl Rose of All for United. Overrated and a bit of a dick.
But well worth waiting for.
Worth waiting for. Thanks.
Cheers, Phil.
But yeah, thank you so much for joining us in the comments. Genuinely, I had an absolutely wonderful time in the show. And make sure to find the guys on all their socials and send them the love from all the All for United fan base. And hopefully we'll get them back again very soon because this was solid crack. So guys, from me, from all the folks, we'll see you next week. Well, hopefully Manchester United will be 3 points heavier. And until then, say something in Swedish, Phil.
Tack så mycket. Ha det gött.
I don't. That's actually a lot of swear words, Phil. That was very dirty.
It was actually thank you for this lovely evening. And, have a great time.
I know it was, but I just wanted something to go. So, folks, we'll see you soon. Thanks so much again, and good night.